We want to talk about the devil, specifically in reference to the God of the Bible and his relationship with Lucifer. First of all, the Big G is a hell of a parent. Infinitely powerful, endlessly narcissistic, allegedly all-knowing, able to casually excuse away the genocide of an entire planet, most certainly not a loving parent if the Garden of Eden is anything to show for it. Overall, it's a pretty raw deal to have the God of the Bible as your insufferable, direct, divine parent, especially with Jesus and Michael and all those other awesome demigods rolling around taking all the big man's attention. Any child might get a little rebellious when they're so obviously neglected by their parents, and their parents very clearly have the power and resources to include them the same as any other siblings. However, we want to firmly assert that there was literally no other option. Lucifer had to become the devil. He didn't have a choice in it. And no, of course, we are not talking about some emotional mechanisms that forced his hand when actually he could have just done some meditation and gone to a therapist or whatever. We mean that Lucifer physically could not have refused to start the war in heaven and turn against his father, the God of the Bible. But we hear you rebel at this statement, demanding that we accept that Satan is the father of lies and that he willingly turned against God. Well, you're wrong. Not like we don't like what you're saying, so we're gonna deny it wrong. It's exceedingly clear, even from just the writing of the Bible itself, that you are simply factually incorrect. Because God is, numerous times, established to be both all-knowing and all-powerful. And that means that Lucifer's hand was forced from the time that God made up his mind to make him in the first place. We'll explain. If there is a being that is all-knowing, that means that nothing in the future may unfold without them knowing. Simple shit, right? Pretty self-explanatory. All-knowing just means that nobody can do anything that you didn't already know would happen. Now, let's talk about being all-powerful. There is, simply put, nothing that can overpower you. A being who is all-powerful would be able to simply will anything that wanted to turn against it not to. They can snap their fingers and make anything happen, be that changing the minds of men and animals, or resetting the universe, or erasing the entire philosophical concept of evil or entropy from existence. Being all-powerful means that you can do whatever the fuck you want so long as you can think of it. In strict hypothesis, it even means that you could will into existence thoughts that you couldn't previously think of so that you could be more creative than you were before. Truly, the power of being all-powerful is infinite so far as the human mind can possibly fathom. And we can fathom a lot. So, if we put these two together, it means that the God of the Bible is an entity that knows everything that will happen in the future specifically because he dictates it to be so. If he didn't like what he saw, he would simply snap his fingers and correct it, and it's impossible that he can see anything he doesn't like because no entity in all of existence can possibly disobey him or overpower his preferences with their own. As so many believers like to parrot, it's all according to his plan. For an entity like this to exist, logically, it would mean that every second of every minute of every hour for all of eternity would necessarily have to be his choice. Every incident and every event unfolding strictly in existence because that entity decided to let it exist. For he knows it is coming and can decide to deny its existence with a mere whim. Well, that means free will is right out. Indeed, the very concept of free will is mutually exclusive to an all-knowing, all-powerful entity like the God of the Bible, considering that nobody can ever make a choice that God has not already anticipated and approved of. Not that nobody does, that nobody even can. According to the definitions and labels granted to him by his believers, the God of the Bible's very existence means that free will simply cannot exist. Every second is known and directly approved of by the big man himself. Now, we don't have to go into how ridiculous this all sounds on its face, because this is just a thought experiment. Of course it sounds ridiculous, and we don't expect anybody reading or listening to this to believe in such an entity. Unless, you're a Bible-believing Christian. But even then, it's pretty clear that you can and do accept, within the bounds of this thought experiment, that these are the qualities of the God of the Bible. All-knowing and all-powerful. And so free will cannot exist in the same universe as God has purview. So now let's get to Lucifer. God knew that Lucifer would turn against him because he is all-knowing. If he ever had a problem with this, he could have simply snapped his fingers and forced Lucifer not to rebel because he is all-powerful. Or he could have made Lucifer unable to carry out any evil from his very creation. Or he could have simply chosen not to make Lucifer at all. Or he could have chosen to not make evil in the first place. No matter how you look at the equation, God freely made Lucifer, let Lucifer grow discontent, let Lucifer rebel against him, caught the universe on fire, misled his children, if you believe that the serpent was Satan, which she was not, and create evil upon the world. God also necessarily had to have made hell for Satan to live in, assigned hell to be the place where people he didn't like go, and made the choice to make atheists and sinners sin because they couldn't have possibly done anything otherwise if he didn't want them to. Even if free will did exist, God could have easily snapped his fingers and simply made all people completely incapable of evil and sin without violating free will, because, after all, that is what all-powerful means. It means that you can do whatever you want, however you want it, whenever you like. So God made Satan on purpose. With purpose. Given the rules put forth about the God of the Bible by the Bible itself, Lucifer could have only done anything he did if God specifically chose for him to do it. Lucifer did nothing wrong, because he didn't do anything at all. He had no agency to do so. He is, and always was, simply put, God's personal puppet. A scapegoat that the all-powerful entity could blame so that others would fool themselves into believing that the big G himself was somehow powerless to stop his own creations from introducing evil into the world, when, in actuality, none of his creations had any choice. Give the devil his due. He was only doing his job. The job that he had no choice but to accept for the sake of a megalomaniacal divine narcissist who controlled his every action and will continue to do so for all of eternity. Don't hate the puppet. Hate the puppeteer.